DJ Lagway says he wants the #1 class in the country, but can the Gators actually get it done? We're chatting with Zach Abolverdi about that right now. All right, let's start here. Are you surprised that UF has the #2 overall recruiting class in the country?
Maybe surprised that it's happened this soon. I definitely always expected them to have a top 5, potentially top 3 class. I just didn't think that they would ascend this fast. I thought it may take until the end of July or just some more of these official visits to play out or even maybe some games to get played. But like the fact that they've been able to reach it, that ranking this quick is pretty impressive. Now they got to hold it because other teams are going to land some commitments and that thing could shake up. As long as they stay in that top 3 range and don't slip past 5, I think they're going to be right where Florida fans want them.
So DJ Lagway has long said that he wants the #1 class. And I think that people thought like, all right, that's cool, but didn't really necessarily take him seriously when he said it. But how realistic is it for Florida to just go on a run and actually get it since they're sitting at #2 right now?
Yeah, I mean, again, in the On3 rankings, they certainly have the potential to be there, but I just don't know if anybody's going to surpass Georgia, especially, if they have the type of season that people expect them to have, at least in the East. And then, there's also, Alabama's not going to stop landing commitments. They've only got 8 right now. So they're going to challenge for that #1 spot. Florida would have to get some more upsets. Like they would have to probably flip Jeremiah Smith. Or some other receivers of that caliber, although he's, there are few that are as good as him, but like they'd have to get some surprises. They'd have to get a few more top 100, top 50 caliber players to close out the class. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is they are going to be limited, not in the number that they can sign, but in the scholarships that they have available or that they anticipate having available. So they might not be able to sign 28 kids. This class will probably be closer to 22, 23, and they're already at 16.
Right.
So if they're going to sign the #1 class, like every single kid that they land from here on out, most of them are going to have to be elite. So can it be done? That'd be great. Like I think obviously the biggest thing is the blue chip ratio and the average player rating. Like if they are top 3 in that category, and then obviously if they can finish top 3 in the rankings, that's where you want to be. Like whether you're 2, 1, 3, I think you're splitting hairs there. Once you get to like 4 or 5, I think there is a difference.
Yeah.
But man, if they can stay in the top 3, to me that's a big win from where they've been.
So they just didn't seem to have much of an impact last year, but how much do you think that on the field results will play into this recruiting class?
It depends. I think that at the end of the day, as coaches, you find a way to sell your program no matter what. So if they have a 4-win season, there's going to be ways that they can sell that. If they win 8 games, that's going to be something that they can point to as this thing trending in the right direction. Hey, come be part of it. I honestly don't know because the way that they have these guys committed right now, and how many of them seem pretty solid, like I don't really know how much the results of the season are going to impact the decision. Now, the one way that the results of the year could is if they have maybe a better year than expected. If they upset Florida State, sorry, TJ, in the swamp at the end of the year, let's say #2 Florida State, right? Like on their way to go compete in the college football playoff, and they somehow knock them off in a rivalry game and then maybe win their 8th game by doing that. Like that is something that could maybe sway a guy or have an impact on how they close. But if they only win like 5 or 6 games, I don't necessarily know if they'll lose many guys because they kind of already know where this program is at right now. They see the projected win totals from Vegas and some of the other predictions.
So how is Napier able to recruit so well with, the tough season last year? It probably will be a tough season this year. Like what is he selling to these kids that makes them want to hop on board?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think there's a lot of layers there. I think number one, like it really comes down to their staff. Like if they weren't good at their job, if they weren't able to interact with kids the right way, that's in person, that's over the phone, that's via text message, that's in letters, like all that stuff adds up, and they do a really good job of that. So I don't want to take that stuff away from them. Like, yes, they have an army, and yes, they have a way more spending that they're putting into the recruiting budget. Now their NIL is way more, in a much better place. So that all factors in as well. But like I think at the end of the day, these guys are good recruiters, and obviously Katie and Bree and everybody on that recruiting staff, like they do a good job. They've set trends that I think we've seen on some of these official visits that we see other schools doing now. So I think that's factored into it. I also feel like there is an opportunity there for a lot of these guys. Just being honest, this roster is not where it needs to be yet. There's a lot of positions where there's playing time to be had and jobs to be taken, and that's something that they can offer these guys. I don't think they're making any promises, but there's a lot of boxes that they're checking right there, and then obviously. I think that their NIL is in a much better situation now, that when that conversation comes up, they have all their ducks in a row. That's presented in a much more professional manner. And I think that they're not going to lose as many kids maybe that they did early on in this NIL era, because now they have some things in order. So that's obviously helping as well. But, again, they haven't even gotten to the games yet in 2023. And, got a signature win in the Swamp, really since Utah. So, like, the fact that they're able to do some of this, despite all that, is really encouraging.
So I want to follow up on what you said about NIL. A lot of commitments and some really good stuff since the NIL change for UF. How would you rank UF's NIL efforts amongst, like, the elites of college football?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I think that initially when it was Gator Collective, like they were out at the forefront of NIL and the whole collective movement and some of the things that they were doing to raise money from a fan standpoint. So, like, I think initially Florida was actually one of the schools out in front, and then they got surpassed by other schools once they figured out the lay of the land and kind of got their structure in order. So now, like, I think the difference is, the way that they've been able to, I think, create visibility with the fans through Florida Victorious and raise money from a lot more money from that outlet, I think has certainly helped. And just, I think that there were times, obviously, where the way that NIL works, Florida was still learning it. I think other schools were still learning it. But let's be honest, there were programs that were exploiting it and taking advantage of it. And I think the Gators got burned a few times. There's one obvious scenario or case. But, and I just think there's trial and error there. And once you go through that, you're not going to keep making the same mistakes. And now the structure's in a much better place. I think they got more money behind it instead of just Hugh and his rich friends, putting up all the money. There's a lot more that's going into it. And there's a lot more, the way that they're going about doing it with the community service and all the different things that they have to show up for. I think people feel better about donating money to that than, some of the other things that they were doing before to earn NIL, which I don't think it was anything to be frowned upon. It's just not as admirable as charity.
Right. So there's obviously all kinds of strategies out there. It seemed to work well for UF, but do you think that UF got most of their targets on campus in the beginning of June as opposed to the end of the month? Like, do you like the way that they structured that? It's worked for them, obviously.
Yeah, I don't think so much it mattered as much, and I don't know this. I think from my understanding, a lot of how they went into scheduling these visits was who they could get on campus with who. Mm-hmm. And trying to get, obviously their running back commit and Waller on campus at the same time, both guys from Mississippi, Jeremiah Smith, DJ Lagway on campus at the same time. Like, I think a lot of that, how that got structured, I think went into just wanting to have guys that were going to click, that were going to potentially feel like, hey, I want this guy to be my teammate. And, I think that's where things stood. But moving forward, like, are they going to change this? I don't think so. Like, I think that these summer visits and how things like pretty much they have 56 allotted visits. They had 44 in June. I think they had 45 scheduled. So they're really saving 11 visits for the fall. And so this is just the new norm. I mean, Georgia had 17 official visitors the first weekend of June, just like Florida did. Now, 17 official visitors was the most that Florida's had in the modern recruiting era. That was at least in the last 20 years. Now, I don't know, in the Charlie Pell era and something like that, if they had huge recruiting weekends. But like since Rivals.com and Scout.com were a thing, like they've never had 17 on campus. And that wasn't a one-off. Like they did, 16 the next weekend and then 13 this past weekend. So, this is how they go about. This is going back to the recruiting strategy. This is how they go about doing it. They feel like that is the way to land kids and create that atmosphere on official visits versus trying to bring in a lot of kids for a game weekend. They tried to limit that to like, only a couple kids, few kids for one big weekend in the season.
And what do you think are the benefits to doing it over the summer versus the fall, where the fall, I mean, it's pretty easy to sell an incredibly hyped game atmosphere. Like, let's talk about like Florida, Tennessee, or even Florida State or something like that in the swamp. What's the benefit to having them where they don't get to experience that game atmosphere when they're here over the summer?
Yeah, I mean, I think that their attitude with that is, hey, we got to get them back for a game. Like, June is now official visit season. There are some schools that have guys on campus in the fall, but like for the most part, Florida's not alone in having the majority of their visits now take place in the summer. So like they're missing out on the experience of having a lot of student body on campus when they come. And obviously they're missing out on the game day, but they can come back for that. A lot of guys have already seen that from the season before, and then they come into their official visit as like a return trip. But for staff purposes, like, I mean, it's just not even a question in terms of what they would prefer, just in terms of not having to deal with a game, not having to deal, like, you're going to have 100 plus visitors for a Florida football game of kids that just show up in terms of targeted recruits and then guys in the local area that are high school players. Right. You're going to have 100 plus out the gate pretty much after every game. So you got to deal with that as a staff. Obviously coaches are dealing with their team and pre-game, post-game. So once they have them in June, they got all hands on deck, total attention given to the recruits. And as we see, the results paid off.
All right, moment of truth. Where do you think UF finishes in the On3 recruiting rankings?
Oof. I'm going to say top three. I'm going to say top three. I don't want to put a number on. I don't think they're going to sign the number one class. Like I'll put it out there so they can come out and shock me with it. They have the targets out there capable of signing the number one class. Can they get every single one on board to close it out? We'll find out. But I still don't know what Alabama's going to do recruiting wise in this cycle. They're coming. But I think Florida's got the potential to be a number 2, number 3 class in 2024, which would be a huge step in the right direction.
All right, Zach, we appreciate you a ton, and we want to wish you happy birthday. Thanks for spending it hanging out with us. Tell everyone who is tuned in where people can follow you and where they can find your work.
Absolutely. You guys can read all my stuff at Gators Online. Follow me on Twitter at Zach Abolverdi, and check out the podcast as well that I do with Nick. We're also doing some recruiting content as well on YouTube with Corey Bender and Keith Niebuhr. So it never stops. Friday Night Lights is this week, so we got a lot of coverage coming. So stay tuned.
All right. We appreciate you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks again, Zach, for joining us. If you missed our conversation with him about how 10 days literally changed everything for UF, click right here.